Mr. Speaker, I rise today to highlight the less dangerous rhetoric that has led to 2 assassination attempts on President Trump in 2 months. First and foremost, I'd like to thank all the law enforcement officers who fearlessly prevented a second utter catastrophe from taking place this past Sunday. I'm also incredibly thankful for God's continued hand of protection over President Trump. But I'm deeply disturbed that within a 64-day span, President Trump has seen an assassin's attempt to take his life not once, but twice. After the first horrifying attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, many Americans asked for politicians and media pundits alike to turn down the temperature of their political rhetoric. Yet, given the continued targeting of President Trump's life, it's evident that many on the left haven't stopped spewing hateful speech and malicious lies. For years, we've heard rhetoric from the radical left that goes well beyond a mere policy disagreement and crosses into dangerous territory. Think about all the times liberal figures have erroneously labeled Trump as Hitler, or the biggest threat to democracy, and a dictator who must be stopped. Now we're seeing the tragic results of that false rhetoric. President Trump has faced not 1, but 2 assassination attempts. This isn't a partisan issue. This is about the safety of our leaders, the stability of our republic, and the rule of law. Yet disturbingly, we've seen numerous Democrats in the left-wing media blame these attempts on President Trump himself. This level of victim blaming isn't just ghoulish, it's a sinister attempt to normalize the senseless violence and to absolve themselves of any wrongdoing. There are still many unknowns about both of these attacks, and while I certainly have concerns and questions about the obvious security failures that have taken place, I can't silently sit by as the left, including many of my Democrat colleagues, take no accountability for their incendiary rhetoric and shameless lies that undoubtedly have played a part in inspiring the assassination attempts on President Trump. And since the liberal media won't hold them accountable, I will. Here are examples of the less violence inciting dangerous rhetoric. Quoting Vice President Kamala Harris, Trump is a threat to our democracy and fundamental freedoms. Again, she says it's on us to recognize the threat Trump poses. Governor Tim Walz said, are Republicans a threat to democracy? Yes. Are they going to put people's lives in danger? Yes. Former Speaker Nancy Pelosi said, Trump is a threat to our democracy, the kind that we have not seen. Rep. Jasmine Crockett said, MAGA in general, they are threats to us domestically. Rep. Dan Goldman has said, he is destructive to our democracy, and he has to be eliminated. Rep. Steve Cohen said Trump is an enemy of the United States. Rep. Debbie Wasserman Schultz said Trump is an existential threat to our democracy. Rep. Adam Schiff said Trump is the gravest threat to our democracy. Rep. Gregory Meeks said Trump cannot be president again. He is an existential threat to democracy. Rep. Abigail Spanberger said Trump is a threat to our democracy. The threats to our democratic republic are real. Rep. Mike Levin said, Donald Trump is a threat to our nation, our freedom, and our democracy. Rep. Eric Sorensen said, he is the greatest threat to law and order we have in our country today. Rep. Jake Auchincloss said, what unifies us as a party is knowing that Donald Trump is an existential threat to democracy. Yesterday, just 2 days after the second assassination attempt, White House Press Secretary KJP said, President Biden has been clear-eyed about the threat that the former president represents to our democracy. Seriously? She couldn't stop herself and had to join in. And let's not forget President Biden, who said, it's time to put Trump in a bullseye. President Biden has also said, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, Trump is a threat to this nation. As well, Trump is a genuine threat to this nation. He's literally a threat to everything America stands for. Mr. Speaker, these are just a few examples. For the last 9 years, the left has erroneously labeled Trump as a racist, a fascist, and an existential threat to our democracy. They've encouraged protests, approved of violent rhetoric, and in some cases refused to condemn violent actions. They've made it acceptable to view someone with opposing political beliefs not as a fellow American, but as an enemy to be destroyed. Bottom line, when you constantly tell people that our democracy is in existential danger because of one man, and when you label that man a threat to the very fabric of our country, then you should take some responsibility and not be surprised when unhinged individuals take matters in their own hands. Words have power, and Democrats have recklessly used that power for a nefarious political gain. No matter the cost, we as a nation must be better than this. I have 6 words for my Democratic colleagues. Stop it, and stop it now.
Mr. Speaker, I strongly oppose of this Republican's latest assault on the health and safety of our children. Every child deserves clean air to breathe. We in California believe this is our sacred duty. That is why our state has taken strong action to reduce vehicle pollution, preserve our environment, and protect our children. So I just have one question for our allies across, our colleagues across the aisle. Why? Why don't you want children to have cleaner air to breathe? Why don't you understand what this means to their health? Why do you not understand the connection between pollution and asthma and how unfair that is to children in our population? That's why more than 5 decades ago, this Congress acted to preserve California's authority to protect our children and has repeatedly reauthorized that since. Despite this precedent, this bill would restrict the ability of states like California to protect families from dangerous pollution. Now, it's important for people to understand that, as the gentlelady pointed out, this is at the discretion of the states. 17 states have decided that they would use such a waiver in order to protect the children and the air that they breathe. So why would you want to throw the American auto industry into disarray, diminishing leadership and electric vehicle future? You know, Mr. Speaker, as the gentlelady referenced, it's an economic decision that our industry makes. We have in this body, in the Democratic majority, come to the aid of the auto industry, not corporations, but the industry and the workers. And we want our auto industry to be preeminent in the world. California is a very big market for the auto industry. For 50 years, they have lived with this emissions standard, this waiver that enables that to happen. If you're making cars for California, it's easier then to make the same safe cars for the rest of the country because it's a big market in California. And 16 other states have followed suit, representing at least 40% of new auto purchases in our country, a big chunk of our auto industry economy. So again, what would be the reason that you would interfere into the free market of the auto industry, into the free breathing of our children of cleaner air? The only explanation could be that big oil opposes this legislation. They're so living in the past, they don't even realize it, that the future is upon us, and the future is for the children. With that, I urge a no on this rule and yield back the balance of my time.
Reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. At this time, I'm pleased to recognize the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Stauber, for 5 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, just moments ago, the distinguished gentlelady from California made the statement and asked why Republicans don't want clean air and clean water. I reject that premise because this administration would rather mine in the Congo, where they use child slave labor, zero environmental standards, and zero labor standards to get to these EV vehicles. This administration has stopped mining in the biggest copper nickel find in the world, which is in northeastern Minnesota. And my colleagues on the other side of the aisle and this administration has stopped it. So don't come here and ask me why my Republican colleagues and I have the stance we have. We are environmentalists and we want clean air and clean water. That's an excuse. We can mine in this country. We do not have to put memorandums of understanding with the Congo, who use child slave labor. And that's a fact. We can mine in northeastern Minnesota using union labor with the best environmental standards and the best labor standards in the world. But my colleagues on the other side of the aisle refuse to allow it to happen, along with this administration. Don't stand on this House floor and say this about the Republican Party and my colleagues. We are environmentalists as well. We mine in the United States of America. We mine in northeastern Minnesota. We can show the world, because when we allow China to take the demands for critical minerals, that pollutant gets in the jet stream and affects us all, as the gentle lady from California says. We breathe that disgusting air that comes from the communist country of China. So let us mine here, Mr. Speaker. Allow this administration to let us to mine here. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of this rule so we can consider H.R. 1435, the Preserving Choice in Vehicle Purchases Act. This week, we read about horrific cross-country road trip President Biden's Secretary of Energy faced as she tried to travel the country in her electric vehicle. At every stop, Secretary Granholm struggled to charge her government-paid EV. She had to send staffers in gas-powered vehicles ahead of her to stand in line at the EV charging station, going so far as to block families from charging their own vehicles on hot summer days. Her gas-powered vehicle from her staff had to go sit in front of a charging station, waiting for her to come so she could charge her vehicle to make a statement and let that family suffer, waiting for the charging station to be opened. Now, just imagine if Secretary Granholm tried driving across northern Minnesota in the middle of winter. 20 below, 37 below, 50 below. By the way, that cold in Minnesota, we still go to work and we still mine and we still weld in the coldest of temperatures. Can you imagine her trying to do that? I'm not even sure her EV would even start. My constituents do not have the luxury of having government-paid staffers to advance their road trips and access EV charging stations ahead of time. My constituents cannot afford to pay an extra $17,000 on average for electric vehicle, especially as Bidenomics destroys the pocketbooks of my constituents who have had to pay an average of $10,000 more a year. If Americans want to drive EVs, they can, but they shouldn't be forced to. It should be their choice. Today, nearly 95% of Americans drive an internal combustion engine vehicle powered by gasoline or some form of ethanol or biofuels. If liberal elitists from California want to drive electric vehicles, so be it. But my constituents, Mr. Chair, should not be forced to do the same. I believe in choice, not mandates by the federal government. And I urge my colleagues to join me supporting this rule and supporting H.R. 1435, because it is time that Congress steps up and protects our constituents from ridiculous mandates that affect our way of life. And I yield back.